Hey, hey, what's going on? You know what time it is. It is happy hour in MOA. And for those who may not know what happens here, I just kind of want to make sure I reiterate. So if you don't know what happens during happy hour in MOA, what we do during happy hour in MOA is we talk art, culture, and spirits. And we're going to bring on our mixologist, Danielle Pearman, first to join us. She's going to give us the delicious cocktail recipe. And then after we wrap up with Danielle, we're going to bring on our special guest for tonight, author, activist Darnell L, who's going to join us and have a conversation. It is Women's History Month, so we're going to touch on some topics that revolve around that and talk a little bit about intersectionality, right? So with that being said, let me jump in and bring on my first guest, which is Danielle.
But it's so good to see everyone again. So good to see you as well. We've made it to March.
Summer is coming and quarantine may be over soon, so I'm super excited.
Right. And yeah, this is like, we're almost at like the year anniversary of being totally shut down. So crazy.
Sad, but it also is a reminder of how important it is for those who have access to get vaccinated. Go ahead and get vaccinated. For those who are debating, do your research, dig into it, figure it out, but do what's going to be best for your family, because we all want to move through this and just be in a better space, especially with summer coming, right? So speaking of summer, Danny, would you mind like jumping into a cocktail recipe really quickly for us? Did I lose you? Oh, there you go.
Can you see me?
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
This is what I like to call a good transition drink, because we're moving into spring. We're getting rid of the winter. So it's a winter spiced Moscow Mule. A Moscow Mule is usually made with vodka, lime juice, and ginger beer. Very, very, very simple. But today I'm going to add a little bit of, I got to put a Drinks with Danny spin on it, my own little thing. So we are using, I have my building glass here. You're going to start off with your Tito's. Hello, we gotta have our Tito's vodka, right? Every month when I'm on here with you guys. So I have, this is 2 ounces of vodka. I'm gonna add.
And shout out to Tito's, who does support happy hour in MOA. So if you're wondering why we're always using Tito's, that is the reason.
Yep. And you know what? You just can't go wrong with Tito's because it tastes, it kind of like hides behind everything. So it's there, it does its job, but it doesn't overpower your drink. So that's 4 ounces of our Tito's there. It's one of those Fridays, so we're doing 4 ounces today. And then next, what I have here is a little bit of simple syrup that has been infused with rosemary. So when I think of rosemary, I think of that wintry feel, but we're trying to get rid of that. So we're gonna move out of it, but we're gonna include it in our drink. Okay. So all you have to do is boil water, sugar, same parts, so equal parts of sugar, water, and then you just drop a rosemary sprig in there and let it boil. When it comes to a boil, let it simmer, let it cool down, and then you go. So basically it's a sweetener that is infused with that flavor of the rosemary. Good to go. So what we're gonna do is 1 ounce of that, or a little bit less than an ounce. If you don't like your drink too sweet.
Yeah.
And then what you're going to do is add a little bit of that lime juice as well. A 1/2 of an ounce of that. And drop that in there. And that's that signature Moscow Mule taste. When I think of a Moscow Mule, I think of summertime on the beach. So that's why I'm doing that little transition here. And next what we're going to use is orange bitters. So this right here is also going to give you that flavor. Bitters is basically just a combination of botanicals and spices, but this one is more, has more orange flavor in there. So I'm gonna take our bitters, literally just drop it on top like this and let it go. Don't be scared of the bitters. You gotta let it go. And then after that, I have my orange here. It's gonna be for later.
Yes,
I have some cranberry juice, which is not in a typical Moscow Mule, but like I said, we're switching it up. We're doing doing our thing. And so I'm gonna add 2 ounces of that cranberry juice. Mm-hmm. Drop it in there. It also looks really pretty. And that is it.
And you do have one question from the chat. So they want to know, does brand matters when it comes to the bitters or your selection of bitters? Does it matter what brand you use?
It's interesting. I would say no, because there aren't that many bitters out there that are bad. If you think of that, like there's not like, there's levels to alcohol, right? Like you're like, oh, I don't want to mess with that bottom shelf stuff. Basically, if you get anything that's Angostura, you're good to go. That is across the board. You'll go to any bar, Angostura is what you're going to see. But I've been seeing a lot of like craft bitters that are really good, all types of flavors. There's like chocolates and there's smoky ones, and there's so many. And if you're into adding different types of flavors to your cocktails, definitely start playing around with those bitters. There's really good ones out there. Hope that answers your question. So what we're gonna do now is combine everything. I already have my ice in there. Just shake it up. And then you have to use the typical Moscow Mule mug. So if you've ever gone out and you've seen one of these, usually it's because somebody's drinking a Moscow Mule. This is what keeps your drink nice and cold. It also looks really cool. I have like a little rose gold one, a little fancy. But they're not even that expensive. You can go to like Marshalls or TJ Maxx and get one, and they have like cute little sets. So this is definitely, you have to have one of these though when you have a Moscow Mule. So next, what I'm gonna do before I move on is just cut my orange. This is just for garnish. If you want a little extra orange flavor, you can always squeeze a little in there. It's up to you. But that bitters will do the job for you. So you don't have to do it if you don't want to. So just cut my little orange up.
You're getting a lot of love from the chat. One is like, you got to teach the people. You must have the copper mug. So the copper mug is mandatory.
You gotta have it. You gotta have the copper mug. If it's a real Moscow Mule, you're gonna have this mug. And it also looks really good on your bar. So if it's not something you drink all the time, if you have this in your bar, people are like, okay, they know what they're doing. They got their copper mug. So what we're gonna do next is you're gonna drop. Usually I'll strain a drink, but you don't even need to do that. You're just gonna drop the whole thing into your cute little mug. Gonna garnish with that orange. If you have extra rosemary left over, you could drop it in there as well. And that is it, guys. That is our Moscow Mule, our winter into spring spiced Moscow Mule here with moi, Drinks with Danielle Pierman. Of course, now it's time for the taste, my favorite part of the night.
Drum roll.
I'll let y'all, I already know, but I'll let y'all know what it tastes like.
What we got? What we working with?
You know what? After this week that I've had, this is exactly what I need. This is it's really refreshing. It still has that fresh Moscow Mule. Oh my God, no! I totally forgot. No, we can't do it without the ginger beer. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, guys. One last thing. We're gonna top it off with our ginger beer. It was good without it, but there is no such thing as a Moscow Mule without your ginger beer. I'm using Gosling's. This is a really good brand to use, but you guys can use whatever type of ginger beer you like. Now we have our copper mug. We have our ginger beer. We have our vodka. This right here is a true Moscow Mule with a little Drinks with Danny spin on it. I'm so sorry, guys. All right. Cheers. And now let me give you the real. And that's it. Yeah. That was it. And you know what? It did taste really good without it, but that ginger beer is the signature. And when I tasted it, I was like, I'm missing something, and that was it. You have to have that signature ginger beer in there.
One of our viewers wanted to know, do you use a non-alcoholic ginger beer or an alcoholic or ginger beer that has alcohol?
I use non-alcoholic because I just want that flavor, but I don't necessarily know if most ginger beer that you're going to find if you go to your grocery store is going to be non-alcoholic. It's just, I guess I got to do some research to see exactly why it's called ginger beer if there's no beer in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, most of them they're non-alcoholic, and you're good to go with. You can give it to your kids. They can drink it. It's okay. But yeah, definitely go for the Goslings. Go for whatever's in your grocery store or liquor store.
Now, just the FYI, for those who came in on the end part of this recipe is located on our website at www.newarkmuseumart.org. For those who love cocktails, and this is your thing, you want to entertain, especially in the midst of, we are still in the middle of a pandemic. So entertaining is part of what we have been secluded to do at our homes. So mixing drinks at home for your company. I would encourage you to follow Danny. Danny, could you drop your IG really quickly? Because you...
Yes, it is Danielle Pearman. My last name is PEARMAN _ Or you can search Drinks with Danny and the hashtag will come up and you'll find me. I see there's like an argument going on in the chat about the ginger beer. Yeah, guys. Most ginger beer, you're not going to have actual beer or actual alcohol in it. But there are some craft brands out there that make ginger beer and they add in the alcohol so you could just have everything in there. I hope that answers the question. But if you're making this drink here, use the non-alcoholic. All you need is that flavor of the ginger and the bubbles and the sweetness to really bring the drink home. That's it.
Nice. Well, thank you for joining us as always. I look forward to, again, doing this live. I say this at the end of each segment we do together when we're able to get back into the museum. And we can actually kick this thing off and do a live stream from the museum where we can actually have guests come and taste the cocktails that you created for that week. So with that, I can't wait to do that. But enjoy the rest of March. It is Women's History Month. So with that being said, we're going to big shout out all my ladies. We definitely want to empower all of our young ladies. And, you know, just be the backbones for them because they're always supporting us. So let's support for all of us guys. Let's support the ladies. So
definitely. All of that good stuff. So good to see you. Happy Women's History Month. Shout out to all the women within the spirit and food and hospitality industry. I also work in production, so shout out to all the women making amazing content out there. And yeah, you guys definitely enjoy the rest of your night. And make one of these and let me know what you guys think.
Yeah, we want to hear about it. So drop it in the chat if you got the ingredients and you were making it along with Danny. And stay tuned because my next guest, right? My next guest that I'm bringing on, we're going to get deep. We're going to, again, explore the idea of intersectionality. And we're going to talk women. You know, let's talk about celebrating Black women. Let's do that.
I'm sticking around for that one, definitely. All right, bye, guys.
So much. So I'm going to go ahead and pull in my next guest as we let Danny go. Let's see. So for those who are not aware, my next guest is, as I said earlier, author, activist Darnell L. We're going to bring Darnell on to talk intersectionality, to talk celebrating Black women, to talk progress, right? Hey, what's going on, sir? How are you?
Hi.
I'm so glad you could join us tonight. Can you hear me fine? Is everything good on your end?
Yes, I can hear you fine. It's good to be here. It's good to be here with you.
Yeah, our previous guest, Danny, had some issues with the tech. Because for those who may not be aware, Instagram has totally changed up their live chat. So I think the last days they did the shift. So it may take a second to get re-familiar with the platform and this new layout. But thank you for joining us. Foremost, how has your week been? It's Friday.
It's been a long week, but I'm good. Look, it's Friday. I'm celebrating the fact that we made it. The fact that we made it.
Yes, absolutely. Now, I know you said that you were drinking red wine. Did I follow that correctly?
I'm going to drink red wine when I'm done. Right now, I'm drinking water. It's still early on this. Well, listen, it's 3:18 on the West Coast. It's wine time all the time, but I'm drinking water for right now.
It's okay. I'm gonna drink enough for the both of us. How about
Thank you. Do
I'll
that.
Start it off, and then when we're done, you can close us out. So
for sure.
So before we jump into, I have a couple of questions lined up for tonight as we dialogue about this idea of celebrating Black women, intersectionality. But I want to just give our viewers, especially our Newark Museum of Art viewers who may not be familiar with who you are and the amazing work you're doing out here in this world. I want to underscore that really quickly. So with that, I'm going to just quickly read your bio really fast.
Oh my gosh.
The
abbreviated version, please.
Abbreviated version. I won't go.
Okay.
So I think it's important that we acknowledge, you know, our Black and brown folks when they're doing great things in the community. So I just want to do that or lead the conversation with that, and then segue into the actual interview portion. So I'm going to start off first by stating that Mr. Darnell L is an educator. You know, not only is he an educator, he's a writer, thought leader whose work on marginal identity, equity, social justice has enabled him to be in community with those creating impact in the U.S. and abroad over the past 2 decades, all right? Darnell L is also an award-winning author. If you didn't already see me flash his book, I flashed it, which I'm going to have you sign this at some point when we get to meet again. With that, his memoir, No Ashes in the Fire, Coming of Age, Black and Free in America, which was listed as 2018 New York Times notable book, and Barnes & Noble's Discover Great New Writers Pick. Moore is also a writer in residence at the Center of African American Religion, Sexual Politics and Social at Columbia University. I think we should underscore that, yes. And a 2019 senior fellow at the Annenberg Innovation Lab at the University of Southern California. His writings have appeared in the New York Times, Book Review, Playboy, Vice, The Guardian, The Nation, Ebony, and other outlets. He is the Director of Inclusion Strategy for Content and Marketing at Netflix. And he is currently at work on his second book, which is tentatively titled On Vision Beyond the Limits of Man, as well as the host of podcast series. So I just, again, I know you probably, it's weird.
I'm laughing. Danina's in here. She said, "Oh my God, he hates this." It's so true.
You're having, I know for,
and my mom was in here too. What's up, Mom? And Raquel, all of my folk. It's good to see y'all in here.
And I love seeing the support. You know, that's when you know you're a real one, as they would say, right? When you support your family and your friends, and they actually show up. But I know it can be awkward hearing your, all of your credits read back to you. But again, I think it's good to celebrate all of our people who are doing amazing things while they're here, to be able to acknowledge that celebration. So I had to get that out the way before we jump, right? So I know originally our conversation was supposed to take place in January, and I was supposed to ask you questions in relation to MLK, Vice President Harris, and reflecting on our progress, which I still may sort of, teeter around for the most part, especially since that was a historical moment. But I'm going to change the conversation a little bit tonight, and I want to discuss equality and equity from the lens of intersectionality, right? Especially since you just recently wrote an article for Ebony Magazine titled Stop Calling Black Women Magic. And
unless you're willing to name them as human too. That part is really important to underscore.
And you're absolutely correct, yeah. And let me not read the, as they say, the clickbait part.
Word.
But yes, absolutely correct. And with that being Women's History Month, I think that our conversation should revolve around topics that address women, especially since you just wrote this thought-provocative article. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But I want to kick this thing off first with starting with the obvious, Harris, right? And the fact that we just had this huge victory with Harris becoming the first vice president. That's a woman first. Second, well, I should say reverse that order. She's a Black woman, right? And also just coining it or underscoring the fact that this is a celebration for all women. And in this moment, do you feel like the dream is actually being reaffirmed or coming to fruition? Do you feel like this is a sign of progress for the communities of color? Why or why not?
First, big shout out to Newark Museum for hosting this and for having me on. Newark is my second home, and so much of what I learned about community organizing, about community, about Black love, about care was because of my time in Newark. And I spent a lot of time in the museum and see some of those folk who were instrumental to my becoming on this chat. So I just wanted to shout that out. But progress, how do you measure progress? It's a question that I think requires nuance. Let me first start by saying kudos to Vice President Harris, right? Like, it's a big deal that we have a woman of color in a position in the White House. We should also name, right, that it's a position within the government, within federal government, which is still empire. I mean, so it's not what to talk about that. So that said, I'm very clear, one, that Vice President Harris is in the White House because of the labor of Black women across this country. And all of the many ways they mobilized in our communities to ensure that folk were out in the streets to vote. So I think that that is essential to sort of name, yeah. But I also want to say it's something that, you know, and I try to talk about this with care, because we have to celebrate Black women, and when I say Black women, I mean all Black women, cisgender Black women, trans Black women, Black women who are lesbians, Black women who are straight, Black women who are mask perform and femme, all manner of Black women, with money, without money, all of the Black women in its category should be celebrated. But I think it's important, while we celebrate Black women, to not put the onus on them to do all of the work for us. Black women are not should not be the salvific force whose backs all of the problems of this country are placed on in order for them to be fixed. We owe Black women better than that. We owe them more than that. So I think it's really important, really, really important for us to hold that in context, right? Like to hold that nuance, and to not, in our celebration, burden Black women by putting them in a position of always having to mother the country, mother all of us out of our shit. Yeah. So I think that is something that we have to be really thoughtful about. I don't expect Kamala Harris as a representative face in the White House to fix this country when the country itself has to take on a responsibility, yeah. Right? And by country, I mean all of the systems that are operative, yeah. Take on the work of fixing it, not putting that on the back of any of the Native women in our community or in the White House. Yeah. And let me just say this also. I'm also a big believer that at the end of the day, the state can't save us. We ultimately will need to save ourselves, right? That's never been the case. So I've never had a sort of fantasy of the state being sort of a civic force in the world, saving us, when in fact, for Black people, the state has been one of the things we've had to challenge, legalizing actually our oppression. So I firmly believe in us pulling from the self-determination, the power, the communal collectivity that we have, the power that we have within us to do what we need to do without waiting for the state to save our folk, to bring hope to our people, to bring resources to them. We can do that. Yeah. We can do that.
And we've proven that. History has shown that the change that has occurred, that has empowered us, has been because we took it, you know, not because we waited for someone to hand it to us. So I definitely have to agree with every single thing you said there. And on that same topic of doing for oneself, right? You are an advocate for equity and marginalized communities. What have you found to be the best approaches to starting conversations that speak to the ways that can best support our communities?
I've been preaching this all day, so that's what the day been long. But I have, for my own self, my own growth, what's been clear to me, yes, it's great to read, to study, to learn from those in our communities, particularly folk who exist on the edges of the margins, who have much to teach us. But I ultimately believe that a big part of the work, the communal transformation, comes by us reckoning with ourselves. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is examining the extent to each of us, because we all are, might be complicit in the oppression of somebody else. Well, what do you mean by that? I don't care. Look, I can have a Black Lives Matter shirt on. I love a good Black Lives Matter shirt. I love a good Black power fist. I love a good notion of Black radical love. Yeah. But I also am very clear that the way that I show up in the world as a cisgender man who is able-bodied, who has access to resources, who has access to care, actually sets me up to get to be safe, to be alive in ways that is just not the case for some others, right? So I'm very clear that, and as much as we do the work of examining whose feet are on our necks, here's where the real work happens, the radical work, the hard work. It's naming the necks that your feet are on. And then after you realize, because all of our feet are on somebody's necks, you got to take them off, right? You got to get them off. That's equity.
Yeah.
That's what equity looks like. That is what material transformation looks like. That is what radical care looks like. So I think it's great. It's great to have all the lingo. It's great to be out here doing all the work, but we got to look in the mirror and ask the self, how am I holding up somebody else's blessing? How am I keeping somebody else from being free? How is my freedom dream somebody's nightmare? How is my freedom dream somebody else's nightmare? And let me be clear about what that might look like. It looks like walking around saying I love Black people, but hating queer and trans and non-binary folk. How is that? Help me to make that make sense. It means that I'm walking around here talking about I love Black people, but I'm catcalling women, I'm disrespecting them, I'm sexually assaulting them. Help me to make that make sense. Help me to understand how it is that I might love Black people if I didn't even recognize that some folk in the movement can't march because they might be disabled or bound to a wheelchair. So in other words, what I'm trying to get at, our politics we have to really evaluate our politics and the boundaries of our radical imaginations, because some of our boundaries, our imaginations are other people's cages. So I think we get free as a collective by first doing the work of getting ourselves freed from all of those ideas and biases that we have allowed to be, these lies really, that we have allowed to become truth for ourselves.
Yeah, and they're permeated, right? You know, over the years and years of being told, you know, this is how it should be and this is what it is. They permeate, and it's a condition that you have to break in order to truly be free. And I want to harken back to the idea of looking at the community as a whole, because I want to go back to what I touched on in the opening about your article that you wrote in the current issue of Ebony Magazine. And at first glance, again, for those who are reading just the clickbait, right? They might read that and not get a clear sense of what that implies via your lens. So would you mind expounding a little more about that article and what that article in its entirety sort of speaks to?
Yeah, and you know, shout out to Black women. I mean, that article inevitably was a love letter to Black women, especially my mom. And in no way was it meant to distract from all of the labor, both the sort of visible and invisible labor that Black women have done to ensure that we all might be even having this conversation right now. What I was trying to say, and maybe I didn't say it as clearly as I could, is that yes, Black women certainly are magical. Black people are magical. But there is a way that we somehow mistake this magic, this ability to show back up, to be present after somebody had their boot on your back, to be resilient. Resiliency is an indication that there is a force that keeps knocking at us, right? I'm more interested in us allowing the space for the Black women, particularly, to their humanity.
That part. That part. Yeah.
Their humanity, the fact that they're alive and are here. So in no way am I pushing against an entire movement that has underscored the unique contributions and power and love of Black women. What I am also trying to say is somehow we have, in our American psyche, Black women have always been upheld as those bodies that can take and take and take and be beat and be targeted and take and take and take and take, and so much so that we forget to acknowledge that they feel too, that they bleed too, that they have needs too. And those things are critical. We just went through a pandemic. We're in a pandemic. Even in a global pandemic that was supposedly leveling all of us across the globe, what did we find out in the context of the US? Among all the population, who were most directly and disproportionately impacted? Black and brown women. Not only were they impacted and at sort of, open to higher rates of COVID infection, but they were damn sure in the trenches, in the healthcare facilities, taking care of America's sick people. Yeah. And I often say, like, I talk about queerness as magic. I talk about that as magic, but I always say when I think about young queer and trans people, ain't enough magic in the world, right? Ain't enough magic in the world powerful enough to remove the barriers that are taking some of our young people out of here. We're human. with dynamism. We are humans with like the spirit of our ancestors that are guiding us. We are a people who have survived so much. And I damn sure know that I don't want the fiction to have to be continued, that Black people, we so strong that you can continue to hurt us and go on about it, and we're going to get back up. This is why in doctors' offices, there are doctors that are not giving Black women pain medicine because they think Black women can just take it. I want Black women to be loved enough to be freed enough to be their human self.
Yes.
So that was what that was about. You know, and you can't, I mean, maybe the sort of textures of that may not always come across, right, in a written word, but certainly the spirit of it is such that I'm never out here disrespecting Black women or telling, and I can't speak on behalf or for Black women. They only can speak for themselves. What I can do is talk as a Black man, and I was really, that headline wasn't to Black women. Stop calling Black women magic unless you are willing to name them as human. I wasn't talking to Black women. I was talking to us. Us who have benefited from the work and labor of Black women who tend not to sort of celebrate Black women and allow them to just be.
Honestly, after reading an article, the statements made me reflect on my own personal relationship, which I think that's what that article embodied. It made me look at my own relationship with my mom, my little sister, who are in the chat. So shout out to my mom and sister.
Shout out to them. My sisters are in the chat too.
And it made me self-aware of how unintentionally selfish I can be in some of those relationships, right? Because of my omission of their humanity, only resting on their resilience. Is sort of what I walked away with. Like, it's like, you know, I'm so used to them being strong that I sort of kind of expect it, right? It's not you're not doing it with malice, right? It's not, you know, by any means, and you try to be there for, you know, your family and the women that are in your inner circle. But as you highlighted, it's a conditioning. It's a thing that, whether you intentionally mean, it's almost like a bias. Like, there are biases that we have that we aren't aware that we have, and you really don't become self-aware of them until you turn the looking glass into yourself, right? So I say that to say that I believe your article was super effective.
It was really for us.
And checkmate.
You know what I'm saying? And I'm like that. I'm so grateful that you were vulnerable enough to share that, because these are the conversations that we have to have these conversations, not Black women. This is our conversation to have. The problem of us seeing them, you know, of the society really seeing them as non-vulnerable and too strong, you know, so strong that it can't be broken. That's not the problem. That's not Black women's problem. That's ours. That's our problem. We got to do the talking. We got to do the self-reckoning, not them.
And you highlighted that moment in intersectionality when you were talking about all Black women, right? And that brings me literally to my next question. So when there is no name for a problem, it makes it very difficult for the mass to see and identify ways to fix it, or even acknowledge that it's a problem, right? So what would you propose would be a great way to highlight the disenfranchisement of those who fall on the corner of intersectionality, i.e. race and gender, i.e. women and women of color, i.e. homophobia and transphobia? How do we spotlight these problems in these areas and bring them to the forefront of the conversation?
So there is no way that we can ever have a conversation about Black freedom or Black liberation that is not inclusive of all the Blacks, right? And so I often say that if you're trying to fix or destroy a multi-headed monster that is white supremacist, hetero, patriarchal, cis heteropatriarchal capitalism, right? You're never ever going to do that with a single variable tool or weapon. What Black feminists in particular have taught us is the idea that there is no way to undo the harms that impact all Black people if our political vision is not inclusive of them. I mean, you can't be out here talking about like end white supremacy without saying, okay, also ending sexism and patriarchy and misogyny and our ableism and our trans antagonism. Like, all of those things are interconnected. Big shout out to Kambahi River Collective, who talked to us about this term simultaneity of oppressions, right? So I think the first thing I would say is we got to do better at holding a vision for Black freedom that does not leave any black people out of it. And in order for that to happen, we have to see all black people as beneficiaries of that dream. And in order for that to happen, we got to fight for all of them. That means, right, like you showed up when we did the BLM march, right? Well, when we were marching in Newark and doing the Pride March, I need to see you there too. I need to see you on Broader Market when the black and brown and working poor LGBTQI folk are out in the streets who actually are fighting out here for all of us, in spite of the fact that we have folk out here that ain't fighting for us. When you look at the movement for Black Lives, this iteration of a long struggle for Black freedom was one that actually centered and proffered Black women, queer and trans folk. And it was like, we're not going to move. This is not going to be a Diane Nash Bryant Rustin 2.0. You're not going to have me out here planning the march in Washington, which is what Bryant Rustin did, and then tell the brother to stand in the back on a march, and we're giving Martin Luther King praise, which we should, and all the black women and queer folk and folk like Pauli Murray, who's gender non-binary, doing all this work to help the people, and the people damn sure not giving them any props for all the work that they're doing. This is not that good. It's not that iteration, right? So I think the work is for us to make space for the big, full, delicious, brilliant, the dynamic folk that we are. Yeah. That we are.
Yeah. We must be on the same wavelength, because my next question was about Bayard, right? I actually was segueing into that because we were talking about advocacy. So we kind of got to bring up some of the historical figures from the past, right? And when we look at the past, civil rights leaders like Bayard Rustin, who was considered MLK's right hand, right, when it came to stewarding the leadership of the civil rights movement, but due to the fact that he was a part of the LGBTQ plus community, he was often subdued in the role and made an advisor, as the world then was very outwardly homophobic. And the majority views on this topic prevented people like Rustin from being able to be more visible. Do you feel our modern climate has changed and allowed room for members of the LGBTQ plus community to rise to seats of power while being able to hold that seat as their full self? And that's what I wanted to score, as their full self, because that's the conversation.
And shout out to Bell Hooks, is where Bell Hooks actually gifted us, right, that frame. So thank you for shouting Bell Hooks out, who is someone who I count as a mentor of mine. Yeah. But I think the question is, but are we? And we are. We have a movement for Black lives that is largely has largely been invigorated by the labor, the intellectual labor, the physical labor of queer and trans and non-binary. We've been here. Yeah, yeah. And if any of us would deny, or any of us who believe and have placed our hearts and our love in this current movement that we have, it is because so many of the folk who have been part of that are also queer and trans and non-binary. We've been here. And big shout out to my sister Opal, who is on here too. Opal, I love you. One of the curators, co-founders, and co-conspirators of the Black Lives Matter Global Network. So I don't know if the question is, like, we here. Yeah. We here, and even, it was interesting to me when I think about my time in Newark. Yeah. So much of the heartbeat of the community organizing was sort of fueled by the energies of Black LGBT people there. And not just in the more recent history, I mean for a long time. There's some way that we have believed this fiction, because in many of our historical accounts, people purposefully erased our contribution, so we should name that. And if it's been erased, then you got to understand that people are not going to realize that not only queer and trans folk, but women too, have been central to so much of the work around Black liberation. But we have been out here. We've been out here. Right? And I just need to just say that, because when we recognize that, there is no question really about how we might show up. Guess what? We've been showing up. Yeah. And we were showing up and we were fighting, even on the ground in spaces where people ain't care two shits about our fight. We were still out here and remain so to this day.
piggybacking off of that in advocacy and how the important role that the LGBTQ plus community has played, the important role that women have played in pushing the pendulum forward, right? When it comes to the Black Lives and the Black Lives Matter movement, you've actually played a major role in advancing the mission. Can you share a little bit with our viewers the role you played in assisting and organizing the Black Lives the Black Lives Matter riot to Ferguson in the wake of Mike Brown's tragic murder, along with the continuing work you continue to do to amplify Black voices? Can you kind of speak to that a bit?
I mean, what I'll say in short is that one of the joys of the work that this big, vast collective of people did in organizing. So Black Lives Matter had been a force, an idea that had been positioned in the world before Mike Brown's death.
Yeah.
In 2013, right? So that we talked about Opal, who's here, and Patrice and Alicia have already been doing like putting that idea, this mantra, out in the world. The ride, I think, was critical because it brought a groundswell of people from various parts all over the country, really, and Canada, to one centralized location at the behest, at the invitation or the okay of Ferguson organizers, so that we wouldn't show up like saviors falling out of the helicopter into a community that did not invite us there. Yeah. And I want to say this all happened virtually. The organizing of that happened in 2 weeks, and folk that did this were around the country and all over, and were doing it. Many of whom were not sort of seasoned organizers. Many of them just cared about Black people, like my cousin Tamara, who ain't never organized anything but got all the buses and the hotels together, did all the logistics to make sure everybody traveling from New Jersey and New York area would have a place to stay. And Monica, our sister Monica, Dennis, who raised money so that everybody who wanted to go did not have to pay, right? Some of those people on the bus were Black, they were straight folk, they were queer folk, there were women, there were men, there were young, there were old, there was a 17-year-old on the bus with us, right? There's all manner of things. What was critical about that, I'll say, is when that weekend was done, we realized that there would need to be a holding container, a holding environment for all of the energy and the people who were going to go back home to their own Fergusons. And the Black Lives Matter Global Network then is designed with that in mind, not because there was a need to just create another quote unquote organization, but because there was a need to now have a holding space and environment for this community of 500 to 600 people that was going to go back from Ferguson to their homes. So I was very happy to be a part of that with so many people, and for that to be a catalyst for the global network that now exists.
I think that's important what you underscored there. Not only going to other communities to amplify Black voices, but when you return home, the pushing the pendulum forward doesn't stop. We still have to continue to do the work, right? Oftentimes we think, well, I don't say we think, but some people think therapy is like a one-time, right?
Sure.
I'm going to tell all my people in the chat right now, like therapy is great for all people, especially people of color. We don't stop after that one session. We have to continue to push forward and go back for the sessions and multiple sessions to make sure we're equipped with the tools to be able to hold our own when we don't have access to another person to lean on.
And by the way, I literally just started with a therapist 2 weeks ago, 3. And so I'm just to underscore that.
Shout out to you. I have one as well. She's not in the chat though, but I send her this link. But therapy is important. Like, I mean, there's so much healing that comes from it. I know when I started therapy, I was able to have those open, honest conversations with my family for the first time, right? And those conversations mattered, and they actually helped make our relationship. I already thought the relationship was tight, but it made it even more, communal, right? Because I was able to just, be honest about every single thing from my past, and in the ways that I hurt them and they hurt me, and be able to constructively talk about it and know, and that part of healing, that matters. So
yes, it does.
Therapy, shout out to all the Black therapists, shout out to those who are in therapy. Like, stay with it. It's definitely worth it. And this question, which brings me to like my last kind of sort of question, alludes to that, because you're a biography, right? When you reflect on your own personal experiences, like the one in your book where you highlight as a teen in 1993, you were profiled and accosted by a police officer of color. Let's underscore that part, of color, because we often want to think that, right? You, while simply walking to your aunt's house, you were en route to your aunt's house, because he assumed you were a lookout boy, right? How does this and countless other negative incidences make or plant seeds of difference between Black communities and law enforcement? How do they create or incubate lasting trauma? And again, feel free to speak from your lens, because again, this is your personal experience. How did you digest it then, and then how are you reflecting on it now?
So I think the way that I would answer that is by saying that so many of our experience in the world as Black people, as folk of color, who I like to say survived through the fire.
Yeah.
Those traumatic experiences ghost us. They ghost us, which is why therapy is so important. And collectively and individually, right? And what I want to be clear, trauma does not have to stop our movement forward. It does not have to impede us from healing, but we do have to acknowledge them as having existed. And just, I mean, we have them at the individual level, but let's be clear, we who are descendants of folk who were forced into chattel slavery and forced to, be laborers that really did work to ensure that this country's ideas of itself, I mean, we are at the heart of that. Nicole Hannah-Jones really talks about the idea, if anybody in this country can talk about who is responsible for it being what it is, it's damn sure Black people. So we carry the traces of a lot of those traumas, and not just the traumas that are impacting us by virtue of what the state has done or what individuals have done, but the weight of having to always move and sort of get out of the way of the arrows of white supremacy, of anti-Blackness, of sexism, and so much else is tiresome. So for me as a writer, what's really clear to me in writing a memoir, literature, our ability to find the words on a page to let out so much of what we are often taught to hold in, is itself a healing act. To come clean with, to kick open the closets and say, fuck it, skeletons here, I'm gonna show all the skeletons. Skeletons that are of my own creation, or the skeletons that I may have enacted and put in somebody else's closet, be the cause of. I'm gonna name all of that. That's the only way we can get free. I mean, I mentioned self-reckoning earlier. So for me, writing about that particular experience was meditative. It was healing for me. It was healing for me, and when I can get it out, when I can sort of put it out on the page or put it out in the world and say, this is a thing that happened to me, I might be better able to move from it. Right? So I think that for me, writing has become an avenue for healing. And for transcending a lot of the hurts and the pains that for so long had its grips on me, because I tried to fight it in this, some silo by myself, rather than exposing it to the community and to the world, so that we can reckon with those things together.
You hit on something really important there, the idea of transparency, right? Transparency allows us to be able to connect with so many more people who are struggling with the same struggle, and in that transparency, we actually able to find strength, right? We're able to actually become unified, and not only become unified, we sort of find our footing, because we realize that, wait a minute, I'm not the only one going through this. Hold up, and we're able to where we come together as a community, and we're able to you know what, I'm gonna support you this because I know what that's like, and I've elevated. This is no longer a thing that I struggle with. However, I see what you're doing in A, B, and C, and I need your help. It's like we call it when we pour into someone's cup, right? And you got to be able to like pour into someone's cup, but you also need to have someone pouring back into your cup. So I think that balance and transparency allows us to truly be able to move in that space, to be able to pour into each other's cups and not be empty, right?
Yes.
I really got to applaud you for that, because again, reading your autobiography was very like, it was moving. Just again, seeing the work you're doing out here is really empowering for myself, and I'm sure for multiple others in the long list of communities that we listed at the top of the show. Thank you. Like, this has been like probably one of the most dynamic happy hour interviews we've had. No not to any of my other guests. I love all my guests. Probably been the most. I feel like walking away from this feeling empowered, right? And I think that above all what cultural spaces should do. When you go into a cultural space like the Newark Museum of Art, shout out to Newark Museum of Art, that when you leave or walk away, you should feel empowered and you should feel better equipped to deal with the things historically that have enabled us and be able to move forward with that context in the future of how you're going to be a change maker. So thank you for allowing us to be able to do that tonight. You blessed us. I saw a lot of comments in the chat, some from church, and they were like election plate. So I will have to agree. Thank you for joining us. How can people find you on social media and just connect with you if they're interested in connecting with you?
Well, I just got to say big love to Newark Museum. You know, I love, it's one of the most beautiful collections, but it's just a stunning place, and you've always had a heart, the Newark Museum, for the people, for the community, and not just for the marketability and spectacular nature of sort of like artworks that we don't allow our communities access to. So thank you for that. But I'm around, y'all. I'm on social media, kind of. Like, I'm here. You can see more Darnell on Instagram and on Twitter. I should be off social media and writing my book, so hopefully y'all don't see me on this thing too much. But thank you for allowing me into your space, and for all of my friends and family that's on here. It's good to see y'all, and thank you for all the love.
I think our next goal is to get you at the museum. Like, we got to do this live, because the love that's been in this.
Listen, one of my best memories was the Newark Film Festival. I think it might have been like 2009 or 10. It was the showing of the Sakia Gunn film. Let's shout out Sakia Gunn, a child of Newark, a daughter of Newark, a Black lesbian of Newark. And I remember being on that panel with June Dalberton and the director of that film. And I remember the love that was present in that space. It was a filled auditorium. And we talked openly and honestly about this Black lesbian girl's life, and why the city should be so committed to really making space for Black, queer, and trans and non-binary people. Newark taught me that as much as we have in our imagination, like places like Maplewood and the suburbs that's supposed to be all progressive, Newark was Newark was leading the way. Black people in a working poor city was leading the way, and I've always named that. So kudos to y'all.
We got to represent for Newark. And shout out again to the museum. For a lot of people, they don't know that the Newark Museum of Art is the largest museum in the entire state of New Jersey. So you don't got to go to other neighborhoods or other areas to go get culture, right? It's right here in your backyard. And I'm just glad that Newark has trusted me to be able to bring important and poignant people like you to the forefront, to be able to have these open and honest conversations. For all of those, my name is Darrell Dwayne. Definitely, if you want to know more about our upcoming programs and things that we have on the roster, feel free to follow me on social media, but more importantly, follow the museum. The museum is where you'll get all those nuggets of gold. Again, I thank the museum for putting me in this position to be the community coordinator, to be able to, again, bring voices, in my opinion, that matter, and matter to the community of Newark, and underscore the lens. Like, we got to look at things from our perspective, and it's not about, as you highlighted, no knock to Maplewood, but no knock to the suburbs, but we're based in Newark, and I think we should be a museum for the people, by the people. So
sure. Thank you so much.
All right, I'm gonna let you go. Have a good one.
Bye, y'all.